Sera had a theory about November. Her theory was that November existed specifically to test whether or not you were paying attention. October was dramatic about it, all that color, all that wind, all that deliberate dying. December announced itself, but November crept in quietly, turned everything gray, and waited to see if you noticed. She noticed. She had always been the kind of person who noticed the quiet things. Which was why, on the night everything changed, she was walking home through the old field behind her apartment building instead of taking the bus. The bus was faster. The field was real. The field had mud and dead grass and the particular smell of wet earth in the cold, and she needed that more than she needed to be warm. It had been raining for 6 hours. She did not particularly mind the rain. She was halfway across the field, hood up, hands in her pockets, thinking about nothing more significant than what she was going to eat for dinner when the sky cracked open. Not lightning. She had grown up in this city. She knew every sound lightning made. This was something else entirely, a sound like the world tearing at a seam it had always had but never before pulled on. A crack that came from above and went down, not across. And then light, not the cold blue-white of lightning, but something warmer and older, and completely without color, as if light before it learned to be any particular shade. And then impact. 30 feet ahead of her, something hit the earth with a force she felt in her chest, in her back teeth, in the soles of her feet through the wet ground. Not an explosion, more like a full stop, like something enormous saying, "Here, this is where I stop." Sera stood very still for a moment. The sensible thing, her mother would have said, is to run. Her mother had a lot of opinions about sensible things, most of which Sera had spent her adult life respectfully ignoring. She walked toward the impact instead. The grass was flattened in a wide circle. At the center of it, face down, was a man. Tall, she could see that even prone, dark hair plastered to the back of his neck and his jaw by the rain, dressed in something she had no name for, not quite fabric, not quite armor, dark in a way that seemed to pull the light toward it rather than reflect it outward, like wearing shadow. And behind him, folded against his back, the way exhausted things fold wings. She stopped walking. She stood in the rain and looked at them for a long moment, cataloging them the way she cataloged everything, with the quiet attention of someone who has learned that looking carefully is more useful than reacting quickly. They were black. Not dark gray, not very dark brown black, the way the space between stars is black, a black with depth to it. Each feather was individually present, individually detailed, each one slightly different from the last in a way that made the whole wing look less like a thing and more like a fact, like something that had always existed and always would. One of them was broken. She could see the wrong angle of it, the place where it bent in a direction it was not designed to bend. It made her stomach turn in the specific way that wrongly angled joints always did. She crouched down beside him. He was breathing, slow and effortful, and with a quality to it that suggested each breath was a decision rather than a reflex, but breathing. His face, when she gently turned him over, was she would think about this later, trying to find the right word, and the word she kept coming back to was inevitable. His face looked like something that had always been going to exist. High cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved from something that didn't chip, a mouth that was still even in unconsciousness. Pale skin, paler than anyone she had seen, but not sickly pale the way marble is pale, deliberately, as if color had been left out on purpose. She put 2 fingers to his neck, the way her first aid training had taught her. His pulse was there, slow and steady and strange, as if his heart had simply decided it was going to beat and was not going to be rushed about it. His eyes opened. Gold. Not amber, not hazel, not the warm brown that sometimes caught the light and looked golden in certain rooms. Gold the way old coins are gold, worn smooth by time, warm and ancient and completely, absolutely impossible. He looked at her, she looked at him. The rain came down around them both, indifferent. Sera, don't try to move. I think your wing is broken. He stared at her. His expression was not confusion exactly. It was something more complex than confusion. It was the look of someone who had calculated a great many possible outcomes and had not included this one. The calm woman in the rain, crouching in the wet grass, saying don't try to move with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who finds broken wings inconvenient rather than impossible. Azael, you are not afraid. His voice was rough, like someone speaking through pain they had chosen not to name, but the cadence of it was she couldn't place it, not an accent she recognized, something older than accent. Sera, I'm extremely afraid. I'm just handling it. Something moved in the gold of his eyes. Not amusement, exactly, something older than amusement. Recognition, maybe. the look of something that has seen a great deal and has just seen something new. Sera, can you stand? I live close. You cannot stay in the rain with a broken wing. He studied her with those impossible eyes. She had the sense of being read, not the way people read faces, for clues, for tells, but the way you read something you want to understand completely. Azael, you would bring me into your home. Sera, I would bring anyone in from the rain with a broken wing. Can you stand or not? He could stand. It cost him something to do it, she could see that, but he got upright with the careful deliberateness of someone who refuses to admit difficulty. She put her arm around him, which was a significant undertaking given that he was considerably larger than her, and half guided, half carried him across the field. His broken wing dragged behind them, trailing water. She did not let herself think too carefully about what she was doing. She had learned a long time ago that thinking too carefully was how you talked yourself out of the right thing. She put him on her couch. This required a certain amount of spatial negotiation, because the couch was not designed with wings in mind. The broken one she handled carefully, supporting the joint the way her first aid training had taught her to support injured limbs gently, without pulling, keeping it as close to neutral as possible. He did not make a sound. She had the sense that he was choosing not to, rather than that it wasn't painful. When she straightened up and got her first aid kit and actually looked at the wing properly, she stood there for a moment, accepting that she had absolutely no useful knowledge here. Sera, I'm going to be honest. I know how to set a broken finger. I have no idea what to do with a wing. Azael, it will heal. It only needs time and stillness. Sera, how much time? A pause. He seemed to be doing a calculation. Azael, without the healing properties of my kind, weeks, perhaps longer. Sera looked around her apartment. It was small, one bedroom, a living room that was also a kitchen, a bathroom that required you to turn sideways in certain places. The bookshelf took up most of one wall. There were plants on the windowsill, several of which were in various stages of survival. The couch where he was sitting took up most of the remaining floor space. She did the mental calculation that people do when their life has just become significantly more complicated. Sera, all right, you'll stay here until the wing heals. He looked at her with those gold eyes, and she saw it again, that quality of someone who has calculated possible outcomes and keeps finding the actual one missing from the list. Azael, you don't know what I am. Sera, you fell from the sky, and your wing is broken, and you're on my couch. I can figure out the rest as we go. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, the small apartment was warm in the way that small apartments are warm, accumulated, particular, slightly worn. Azael, I was an angel, a guardian, assigned to this city before your city had a name. She put the kettle on because her hands needed something to do. Sera was past tense. Azael, I made a choice tonight that cannot be undone. What I was no longer applies. Sera, what choice? She brought him tea. He looked at the mug the way he had looked at the apartment, with the focused attention of someone cataloging something they have never encountered before. He held it in both hands. Azael, I chose to fall. The words sat in the warm kitchen air between them. She leaned against the counter and looked at him, at the dark wings folded carefully behind him, at the gold of his eyes in the lamplight, at the impossible, factual reality of him sitting on her second-hand couch holding a mug of tea. Sera, why? He looked at the tea, he looked at her. Azael, that is a longer answer than tonight has room for. Sera, that's fine. Tonight only needs the short version. A pause. Azael, someone I was responsible for protecting was in danger, the kind of danger I could not address from above. I could watch what happened, or I could fall and prevent it. I chose to fall. Sera, the person you were protecting, are they safe? Azael, yes. Sera, then it sounds like you made the right choice. He looked at her again with that quality of someone encountering something they had not predicted. She gave him a blanket, pointed him at the bathroom for the morning, told him her name was Sera, and went to bed. She lay in the dark for a long time thinking about the word chose. He had chosen to fall. Out of everything available to him, every possible response to the situation, every strategy, every acceptable loss, he had chosen to fall. She understood choosing the hard thing. She had done it herself in smaller ways her whole life. But this was something else. He did not know how to use a shower. She discovered this the first morning when she heard the water running for 45 minutes and then found him standing outside the bathroom door holding the shampoo bottle with the expression of someone who had encountered a philosophical problem they were not willing to admit they could not solve. Azael, the instructions on this vessel say to apply, lather, and repeat. Repeat how many times? Sera, twice is fine, once is fine. It's shampoo, not a ritual. Azael, everything is a ritual if you do it with intention. She stared at him for a moment. Sera, that is either very wise or very annoying. I haven't decided yet. He did not know what coffee was. He did not know what a phone was for, beyond the obvious inference. He stood in the cereal aisle of her grocery store for 11 minutes staring at the boxes with an expression of genuine philosophical crisis, head slightly tilted, gold eyes moving from one box to the next with the methodical attention of someone reviewing evidence. Azael, there are 47 varieties. Sera, yes. Azael, why does grain require 47 varieties? Sera, that is a question humanity has never satisfactorily answered. Azael, the variety seems designed to create anxiety rather than choice. Sera, welcome to being human. He chose the plainest one because it had the fewest ingredients and he distrusted complexity he couldn't verify. She put it back and gave him the one with honey because she had decided, somewhere between the field and the store, that if an angel was going to fall from the sky and land in her life, then he deserved to discover that things could taste good. He ate it standing at her kitchen counter the next morning with the concentrated attention of someone performing a ritual, which she supposed was consistent with his philosophy, one piece at a time, very carefully, gold eyes focused on the middle distance. She watched him over her coffee and felt something she didn't have a name for, yet something warm and slightly aching and too large to look at directly, the way you can't look directly at the sun. He was learning everything at once, and he was doing it with such focused seriousness that it kept ambushing her. He watched television with the analytical attention of someone studying an alien culture, which she supposed it was. He asked her questions about everything. Why did that character lie when the truth would have served better? Why was the news program edited to create alarm rather than information? Why did humans spend so much time and creative energy producing content about other humans pretending to be other humans? Sera, because it helps us understand things we haven't experienced ourselves. Azael, does it work? Sera, sometimes. Sometimes it just makes us feel less alone. He considered this. Azael, that is a sufficient reason. He was a fast learner, frighteningly fast. Within a week he could navigate her phone, make coffee that was slightly too strong because he had decided that weak coffee was philosophically inconsistent with the point of coffee, and hold a conversation about current events that demonstrated he had been absorbing news with the same methodical attention he brought to everything else. But it was the evenings that she looked forward to. They had developed a habit, without discussing it, of ending up on the roof of her building when the day was done. She had discovered his preference for height early. He was always slightly more relaxed up there, the tension in his shoulders easing in a way she was beginning to read. Up there he could spread his wings slightly, not fully that was too visible from the street, but enough to feel like himself. She sat beside him in the cold with her coffee, and they looked out at the city, and she asked him things, and he answered with the careful honesty of someone who had decided that honesty was the only option worth taking seriously. Sera, what was it like, watching but never being part of it? He was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city moved and breathed. Azael, like standing outside a lit window in the cold, you can see everything inside. You can see that it is warm. You can see the shapes of people moving. You can understand intellectually that warmth is a real property of the physical world, but you cannot feel it. The glass is always there. Sera, that sounds lonely. Azael, I didn't have the concept of lonely for a very long time. You need a sense of what you're missing before you can name its absence. Sera, and then you did have the concept. A pause. Azael, gradually, yes. Sera, when? He looked out at the city. He didn't answer directly, but she noticed that he didn't look away from her when he said, Azael, now I am inside. That is the part I am still learning to hold. She looked away before he could see what that did to her face. She found the sketchbook on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after he arrived. She had given him one herself. She had noticed him tracing shapes on the fogged-up window with one finger, precise and unself-conscious, and had put a sketchbook and a set of pencils on the table without comment. He had picked them up without comment. This was their system. She offered things, he accepted or didn't, no explanation required on either side. She had not looked at what he was drawing. It felt private in the specific way that creative work is private, not secret, exactly, but personal in a way that asked for the courtesy of not being examined until offered. The sketchbook fell off the coffee table when she stood up too fast on a Tuesday morning, running late for work. It fell open. She looked before she could decide not to. Every page was her. She stood there for a long time, not breathing, turning pages. Not portraits, they were too present for portraits, too immediate. They were moments. Her reading in the armchair with her legs tucked under her, one hand holding the book, the other holding a mug, completely unaware. Her standing at the window watching the rain, coffee going cold in her hand, expression unguarded and private. Her laughing at something on television, she could almost tell what, from the angle of her head. Her asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest, one hand still loosely holding the spine. And then she turned to older pages, and the clothes were different. Her old coat, the green one she had given away 2 winters ago. Her old apartment, she recognized the particular shape of the window, the specific lean of the radiator. The coffee shop near her first job, where she had spent every lunch break for almost a year. The university library, her final year, the specific carrel in the corner where she had written her dissertation. He had been watching her for years. Not weeks, not months, years. She put the sketchbook back exactly as it had been. She sat on the couch. She breathed. She was not afraid. She examined that carefully because it seemed like she should be, and she wasn't. What she was, underneath the shock of it, was something she could only describe as the feeling of a thing making sense, like a picture that resolves when you step back, like an explanation arriving for something you had always noticed but never been able to name. Because she had always felt it, some presence at the edge of her awareness, not threatening, not watching in the way that felt like being hunted, but attending, paying attention to her the way you pay attention to something that matters to you. She had spent years deciding it was imagination, or the particular hypervigilance of someone who had grown up being told to pay attention. She had made her peace with it. Now she understood what it had been. When he came back from the roof, she was sitting in the armchair. She looked at him steadily. Sera, how long? He went still, the specific stillness of someone who has been caught in something they had not planned to be caught in, and who is choosing, in real time, how to respond. Sera, how long have you been watching me specifically? Not the city, me. A long pause. Outside, the city went on. Azael, 7 years. She absorbed that. Sera, why me? He came and sat in the chair across from her. He looked at his hands for a moment. She had noticed he did this when he was choosing words carefully, as if the hands helped him think. Azael, every guardian is assigned a ward, one human life they are specifically responsible for. I was assigned to you at your birth. I have been with you, at whatever distance my nature required, your entire life. She took that in piece by piece. Sera, my whole life. Azael, yes. Sera, the car accident when I was 19. The driver ran the light. Azael, yes. Sera, the building collapse, my first job. I left 5 minutes early because I forgot my umbrella. Azael, you left 5 minutes early because you felt the impulse to go back for the umbrella. I gave you that impulse. She was very quiet for a moment. She was counting all the things she had called luck or timing or instinct, all the near misses, all the moments she had stood on one side of a line and not known there was a line there. Sera, and the night you fell, that was also about me. Azael, 3 weeks ago, before you found me in the field, you walked home through the old route instead of the field. Something made you change your mind at the last moment. That was also me. I redirected you. Sera, because something was waiting on the old route. Azael, something that I could not address without becoming physical, without being here, in this form, in this world. Sera, so you chose to fall, to protect me from something I didn't even see. Azael, I chose to fall, yes. She looked at him for a long time, the man who had given up 4 centuries of his nature, his purpose, his kind, his entire existence to step between her and a threat she had walked past without knowing it was there. Sera, you gave up everything. Azael, I gave up what I was. I did not give up what matters to me. The words sat between them. She understood what they meant. She was not going to pretend she didn't. She also understood that he was not going to say more than that. Not yet. He had the particular restraint of something that has learned to wait, that has spent centuries watching and waiting, and he was not going to push past what she was ready to receive. She respected that. She matched it. Sera, I found the sketchbook, the older ones, the ones from years ago. A beat. Azael, I know, I saw your face when I came in. Sera and Azael, and I am sorry if it frightened you. Sera, it didn't frighten me. He looked at her carefully. Azael, what did it do? She thought about it honestly. Sera, it explained a feeling I've had my whole life, and I don't know yet if that's a good thing or a complicated thing or both. He nodded slowly. He understood complicated things. He told her the rest of it over the following days, in pieces, the way you dismantle something heavy a section at a time, setting each piece down carefully before picking up the next. Falling, he explained, was not simply a matter of wings and gravity. It was a severing, the connection to his kind, the shared awareness, the divine frequency that all of his order moved through the way fish move through water is gone. The ability to exist in the spaces between the physical world, to be in a room without being seen, to move through the city like weather gone. The immortality gone most of all. He would age now. His body would break down the way bodies broke down. He would get ill. He would die eventually in the ordinary human way after an ordinary human span of years. He said all of this with complete evenness, as if he was describing weather. She listened with complete evenness too, because she could see that the evenness was load-bearing for him, and she was not going to knock it down. What she hadn't anticipated was the other consequence. Azael, falling is not permitted. It has not been, in all the time my order has existed. I am the first in 4 centuries to do it. Sera, what happens to those who fall without permission? Azael, there are those whose purpose is the correction of deviations. My fall is a deviation. She felt it before she understood it, a cold certainty settling into her chest. Sera, they're coming for you. Azael, they are coming for both of us. The logic of it is this: a guardian does not fall without cause. The cause is investigated. The cause is either accepted or removed. Sera, I'm the cause. Azael, you are the cause. She sat with that for a moment. Sera, removed mining. Azael, meaning they will attempt to determine whether what I did was justified. If they determine it was not, yes, they will remove the cause. She breathed steadily, carefully, the way she breathed when something difficult was in front of her, and panicking would not help. Sera, how long do we have? Azael, my wing heals in another week. After that I can act. I can protect you in the way I could not from above physically, directly here. Sera, and until then? Azael, until then we stay together. I am weakened, but I am present, and I am not going to let anything reach you. She looked at him. He was sitting very straight, the dark wings folded tightly behind him, the broken one almost healed now, held carefully at the right angle. His golden eyes were steady and without self-pity and completely, absolutely resolved. Sera, you're not afraid of them. Azael, I was afraid exactly once, 3 weeks ago, watching from above and understanding what was coming for you and knowing I had seconds to choose. That was the only time. Sera, this doesn't frighten you. Azael, I chose this, every part of this. What I chose cannot frighten me. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. His fingers were cool beneath hers, not cold, not lifeless, just cooler than she expected. The way stone is cool even in a warm room. He looked at her hand for a moment, and she could see him taking it in, this small, ordinary gesture, processing it with the attention he brought to everything. Then he turned his palm up and held her hand properly. They sat like that for a while. Outside, somewhere in the city, something moved between buildings that was not windy. 2 days before his wing fully healed, she asked him the question she had been holding since the sketchbook. They were on the roof. It was late past midnight, the city below moving in its reduced nighttime way, the sky above clear for the first time in weeks, cold and enormous and full of stars. She had her coffee. He had learned to hold a mug properly, finally, warming his hands around it the way she did. She had been watching him look at the stars. There was something in his face when he looked at the sky that was different from when he looked at the city, not longing exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that was learning to be at peace with a distance. Sera, tell me about watching me, the 7 years, what was it actually like? He was quiet for a moment. Azael, in the beginning, it was what it had always been: a ward, a responsibility, a life to protect. I watched you the way I had watched every other ward I had been assigned in 4 centuries, with care and attention and the appropriate professional distance. Sera, and then Azael, and then you did something that none of the others had done. Sera, what? He looked at the city. Azael, you looked up, often, at nothing in particular, at the sky, at the light, at the space above you. Most people move through the world looking forward or down. You looked up, and there was something in the way you did it, not searching, not expecting anything, just acknowledging that there was something above you, something you couldn't see but were willing to believe was there. She was very still. Azael, the first time you did it, I noticed. The second time, I paid attention. By the 100th time, I had stopped pretending I was watching you as a ward. Sera, what were you watching me as? He turned to look at her. In the starlight, his golden eyes were very clear. Azael, someone I wanted to know, someone I could not stop watching, someone whose ordinary days, the coffee, the books, the arguments with the plant on the windowsill that never grew the way you wanted, someone whose ordinary days were more interesting to me than anything else I had been given to observe in 400 years. Her throat felt tight. Sera, and you couldn't say anything, all that time, you couldn't reach down and… Azael, no, the rules of my kind are absolute on this. Guardians observe, they protect, they do not participate, they do not make themselves known, they do not. He stopped. Azael, they do not fall in love with their wards. That is the rule I broke, before I ever broke the other one. The word fell between them like a stone into still water, sending out rings. She looked at him, he looked back at her with the total exposure of someone who has said the thing they cannot unsay, and has decided, in advance, that they are at peace with whatever happens next. Sera, how long have you known that it was that? Azael, 3 years. I knew for certain 3 years ago. Before that I spent 2 years telling myself it was something else. Exceptional care for a ward, heightened attention, a particular human who had caught my attention. After 3 years I stopped arguing with myself about what to call it. Sera, and you stayed, even knowing. Azael, I had no other choice. To leave you unprotected was not something I was capable of doing, so I stayed, and I watched, and I kept the distance I was required to keep. She thought about that. 5 years of keeping a distance that must have been she could only imagine. 5 years of watching from above, present, and completely out of reach. Sera, I always felt something. When I looked up, I always felt something was there. Azael, I know. Sera, it never felt threatening. It felt like. She searched for the word. Sera, company. It felt like company. He was very still. Azael, for 7 years that was the closest I could come to being with you, being the feeling of company, from a distance you couldn't measure. It was. He stopped, he looked at the stars for a moment. Azael, it was not enough, but it was something, and something, when that is all you have, becomes everything. She set down her coffee, she turned toward him. Sera, I need to tell you something. He waited. Sera, when you fell when I found you in the field, I was afraid. I told you I was handling the fear, and I was, but it was real. And in the 3 weeks since then, I have been trying to be careful about what I feel, because you went through something enormous to be here, and I didn't want to. She stopped. She tried again. Sera, I didn't want you to think I was reacting to the situation instead of to you. Does that make sense? Azael, you were afraid of mistaking gratitude for something else. Sera, yes, exactly. Azael, and no. She looked at him directly. Sera, now I have known you for 3 weeks, and I have argued with you about coffee, and watched you have a philosophical crisis about cereal, and sat on this roof with you every night, and I am not confused about what I feel anymore. It has nothing to do with gratitude. He looked at her with those gold eyes that had been watching her for 7 years and now, finally, were allowed to simply look. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair back from her face slowly, carefully, giving her every moment to move away. His fingers were cool against her skin. She didn't move away. She leaned across and kissed him. He went completely still for 1 moment. She felt the shock of it, the centuries of distance suddenly ending, and then his hand moved to her face and he kissed her back with a focus and completeness that she understood, viscerally, was what 7 years of waiting looked like when it was finally allowed to stop. Behind him in the cold night air, his wings spread open. Fully, both of them, completely healed, every feather in its right place, black and enormous and real, spreading wide against the city sky. She pulled back and looked. Sera, they healed. Azael, yes. Sera, which means tomorrow they will come. Azael, tomorrow I am ready for them, tonight. He looked at her. Azael, tonight I am here, I am inside the window, and that is all I need. She leaned into his side, his wing curved around her, warm and real and blacker than the sky above them. Below them the city breathed, above them the stars stayed where they had always been. She had looked up at them all her life, now she finally understood what she had been acknowledging. They came at dawn as she had somehow known they would. Dawn felt right for it at that threshold time, neither one thing nor the other. She was already awake, she had not slept. She had spent the night on the roof with him, and when the sky began to lighten she had felt a change in the quality of the air, something tightening, like a room before a storm. She had come inside and made coffee and stood at the window and waited. There were 3 of them. She understood immediately that they were not like Azael, where he had gathered humanity around him in 3 weeks like a second skin. The warmth, the curiosity, the coffee, the cereal, these had none of that. They were cold in the way that deep space is cold, not the absence of warmth but the presence of something that had never known warmth and did not miss it. They did not come through the door. They simply arrived between one moment and the next. The apartment was different, heavier, the light slightly wrong, 3 presences standing where there had been nothing. Azael had moved before she had time to process it. He was between her and them, not running, not rushing, simply there, the way he was simply there when it mattered. His wings spread behind him, filling the room, each feather sharp-edged and present. He was not the man who had eaten cereal with philosophical intensity and lost an argument about coffee. He was the thing beneath that ancient thing, the thing that had watched the city through 4 centuries without needing to sleep. The 3 who had come said something, not in any language she knew, not in any language designed for human hearing. She felt it rather than heard it, a frequency that sat in her chest and her back teeth. Azael answered in the same frequency. The exchange was brief. She watched his posture and read what she could from it, not submission, not defiance. Something more like standing your ground in full knowledge of who you are standing in front of and having made your peace with that. One of the 3 looked past him at her, directly at her. Its eyes were that she would never find the right word for this, like looking into something that had no floor, not threatening exactly, just vast, incomprehensibly vast in the specific way that very old things are vast. She met the gaze and did not look away. The arbiter, you are the cause of this deviation. Its voice was like the sound of the sky cracking, but quieter, personal. Sera, he made his own choice. I didn't ask him to fall. The arbiter, and yet here you stand. Sera, here I stand. Azael's wings shifted slightly. She could feel the tension in him from where she stood, not fear, readiness, the coiled stillness of something that has committed completely and is waiting to act. The 3 of them communicated something she couldn't read. Then the one who had looked at her looked at Azael and said something in the human language frequency again. The arbiter, you understand what you have given up. Azael, I understand completely. The arbiter, you understand that it cannot be reversed. Azael, I understand that. I do not want it reversed. Another silence. The arbiter looked between them, from him to her, from her back to him, with that incomprehensible ancient gaze. And then something shifted, not softened, something older than soft, something like a law being applied rather than a judgment being made. The arbiter, the fall was witnessed, the choice was recorded, the cause. A pause that lasted several of her heartbeats. The arbiter, the cause is deemed sufficient. And they were gone, not leaving, simply no longer being there, the room normalizing around their absence, the light correcting itself, the weight lifting. The apartment was just an apartment again, her plants on the windowsill, her overstuffed bookshelf, the mug she had set down on the table. She let out a breath she had been holding for 3 weeks. Azael turned around, his wings folded slowly. He looked at her with those gold eyes, and the relief in them was so complete and so undisguised that it almost looked like pain, the specific expression of someone who has been carrying something enormous and has just been allowed to set it down. Sera, it's over. Azael, it's over. Sera, what did they mean? The cause is sufficient. He looked at her for a moment. Azael, they meant that love is a recognized exception, that it has always been a recognized exception. It is written into the oldest laws that a guardian who falls for love is not treated as a guardian who falls for any other reason. They came to verify. They verified. Sera, love is a loophole in divine law. Azael, love is not a loophole. Love is the oldest law. The others are written around it. She stared at him. Then she laughed. It came out of her sudden and real, breaking through the last of the tension like light through a crack, and she couldn't stop it. He looked at her for a moment with an expression of someone encountering something unexpected and wonderful, and then for the first time, unpracticed and slightly wondering, he laughed too. It was the best sound she had ever heard. It was new and ancient at the same time. It was his. He stayed. That was the simple version. The longer version took months to write itself, and it was made of small things rather than large ones, which she had always suspected was how the best things were made. He learned to cook. This went through several phases. The analytical phase, where he studied recipes with the same methodical attention he brought to everything and produced technically correct food that tasted like it had been made by someone who had read extensively about flavor without having any. The experimental phase, where he decided the recipes were guidelines rather than instructions, and produced several results that were interesting, and one that she was fairly certain was not food in any recognized sense. And finally, the comfortable phase, where he made 3 or 4 things very well and made them regularly, and seemed to find genuine satisfaction in the repetition. He got a job at the city archive, which she had arranged because it seemed like the only place that would make sense, a repository of the city's history, staffed by people who cared about preservation and accuracy, in need of someone with what she described in the reference letter as an exceptional depth of historical knowledge. His supervisor called her after his first week to say that their new colleague had already identified 2 errors in their primary source index and had an apparently photographic recall for architectural history going back several centuries. She told him to be slightly less exceptional at work for the sake of not attracting attention. Azael, you want me to be deliberately less accurate. Sera, I want you to be accurate at a speed that looks like a normal human being accurate. Azael, that seems dishonest. Sera, it's social, there's a difference. He tried, he got better at it gradually, the way he got better at everything with focused, deliberate practice, treating it as a skill rather than a compromise. The wings were the one permanent logistical challenge. In the apartment, they were simply part of the space. She had rearranged the furniture slightly to give him more room, and he had learned to fold them tightly in the kitchen and loosely everywhere else, and she had learned to move around them the way you learn to move around any large, familiar thing. Outside, he wore a coat that a tailor of her acquaintance had made with minimal questions and maximum professionalism, a long dark coat that concealed the wings adequately at distance and required careful management on public transport. On the roof, they were free. That was their place. Every evening, weather permitting and sometimes not, they ended up on the roof with the city below them and the sky above, and his wings spread open, fully, catching whatever light there was. She had stopped being astonished by them, or rather, she had stopped being astonished in the way that creates distance. She was astonished the way you are astonished by the person you love, not despite the ordinary daily presence of them, but because of it. Because they are astonishing and they are also just here, your person, drinking slightly too strong coffee on a rooftop. One evening in what she thought was spring, she watched him look at the sky for a long time. There was something different in his expression tonight, not sadness, not longing, something more settled. Sera, do you miss it? She did not specify what, he understood. Azael, I miss the clarity. There was no noise before, no hunger, no cold, no physical discomfort of any kind, a kind of perfect, uncluttered observation. Sera, that sounds peaceful. Azael, it was, and it was also completely without texture. Everything was perfectly clear and nothing could touch me, and I was very far away from everything, even from the things I cared about. He looked at her. Azael, now everything can touch me. The cold is real. The coffee is real. The argument we had on Tuesday about whether I had been passive-aggressive about the dishes, which I had not been, was real. You are real in a way you could not be when I was above you, and that is worth every discomfort I have encountered in the entire catalog of discomforts that being human involves. Sera, that was a very long way of saying you don't regret it. Azael, I was being precise. Sera, you're always being precise. Azael, yes, it is one of my better qualities. She laughed and leaned into his side, and his wing curved around her, and she thought, this ordinary, ridiculous, impossible thing, this is what he fell for. She still couldn't entirely believe he had. She suspected she never entirely would, and she had decided that it was all right that some things were large enough that you didn't need to fully comprehend them to be grateful for them. She showed him her sketchbook on a Sunday afternoon in late autumn, almost exactly 1 year after the night he fell. She had been keeping it since the third week. Not as good as his, she had no training, and he had 4 centuries of observation behind his hand, and she had only herself. But it was hers, and she had filled it with him, and she had decided that was reason enough to share it. Him at the kitchen counter with the cereal, him on the roof with his wings open, back to her, the city spread below and the sky above, the silhouette of something that had always existed and always would. Him asleep on the couch. She had not known he could sleep, at first, and the first time she had found him there, she had stood in the doorway for a long time watching the chest rise and fall, feeling something she would later understand was the particular tenderness of witnessing someone in the simple act of being a body. Him at the archive, leaning over a map with the focused attention he brought to everything, completely in his element, completely placed. Him looking at her. She had drawn that one many times and never gotten it quite right, because what was in his face when he looked at her was something she could feel more accurately than she could render. 7 years and a fall from the sky, and every ordinary day after, all of it visible, all of it present, all of it here. He turned the pages slowly. She watched him look at himself the way she had learned to look at him, with full attention, without guarding the response. When he finished, he sat very still for a moment. Then he looked up. Azael, this is how you see me. Sera, that is how you are. He looked back at the last page, the one of him looking at her for a long time. Azael, I spent 7 years watching you, and you. Sera, and I have been watching you back, for a year now. I thought it was only fair. He set the book down carefully. He crossed the room. He took her face in both hands, those cool, careful hands that had learned warmth and kept it, and looked at her with everything in his golden eyes, every century and every choice and every Tuesday argument and every rooftop evening and every ordinary morning. Azael, I fell from the sky for you. Sera, I know. Azael, I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. I would do it knowing everything it cost, and I would choose the same. Sera, I know that too. She put her hands over his. Outside the window, the city went on, indifferent and beautiful and entirely itself, the way cities are, the way the world is, moving forward with complete disregard for the specific, miraculous, ordinary things happening inside one small apartment on one unremarkable street. Above the city, the sky was the particular blue of late autumn, clear and cold, and going on forever. He did not look at it, he was looking at her. He had given up the sky, he had chosen the earth. He had chosen the cold and the coffee and the cereal aisle and the slightly too small apartment, and the plant on the windowsill that still refused to grow properly, and all the Tuesday arguments and all the rooftop evenings and every single ordinary day that stretched ahead of them, finite now, as all human days are finite, which meant that every single one of them mattered. He had chosen her. And not once, not for a single moment, from the night he fell to every morning after he looked at the sky and wished himself back.